Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I'm Joanna Cook. I'm part of the Parter PR team, and on behalf of myself and my colleague Abby Silver, we'd like to thank you for joining us at our second Be Part of the Conversation event this year, which is a special event ahead of Parter Exchange, which is the organisation's flagship annual event taking place next week. We'd also like to extend a special welcome to our members of the trade press for joining us this afternoon. So today we have a fantastic lineup of panelists who will be discussing Parter's path to revival in 2021 and into 2022. And if you have any questions during this session, please feel free to post them in the chat function and we will answer them as we go and then towards the end when we hold a Q&A. So without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our chairman of the UK and Ireland chapter, Chris Crampton, to formally welcome you and open today's event. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you, Jo. Welcome everyone to our Parter Revival media briefing and Q&A in advance of Exchange next week. While an online format like this is a valuable means of talking to each other, I'm sure I'm not alone in being heartily sick of staring at a computer screen and pretending it's as good as real interaction. So with luck, this will be the last time that we need to do this, and in future we'll be in the same room, both for this and for Exchange itself, and not least because this would be the point I would be happily inviting you all to join us in the pub afterwards. I am truly delighted that our panel has agreed to participate today, and I hope that the discussions will be both informative. We wanted to move away from asking the impossible for anyone to answer questions, the what date, where, what price, and so on, and towards those that will allow us to gain an insight into how we recover and what the landscape will be when we do. A year ago, we had our first Parter Exchange media event, and what a year this has been. I'm not sure any of us quite grasped what was coming when the first stories about a new virus in China were making the news, and certainly not when we were all checking websites, hoping to see the plateau in cases in Asia securing our island existence. But at long last, we may be coming to the end of this imposed isolation. The vaccine rollout in this country has not gone unnoticed in our destinations in the Asia-Pacific region, nor in those destinations closer to home. For all the challenges that are ahead of us, it is now a question of when rather than whether, and the means by which travel and tourism returns and the form that it will take when it does. I've always believed that the fundamentals of our industry do not change, whatever the barriers put in place. People want to travel, to visit new places and experience new things. The means of doing so, the expense of doing so, the distribution patterns, they all change over time, but that desire to see the world does not. As destinations begin to open, the volume of that travel is a question that is occupying many column inches, as a question of how big tourism will be in 2021 and 2022. I tend to see it somewhat differently. To a fair extent, it doesn't matter what the number of people traveling this year is, it will still be better than in 2020. And that gives us a chance to build and develop and to have some breathing space for the coming year and the coming years. Indeed, the industry has survived in better shape than many of us could have imagined a year ago when we entered the first lockdown. We have lost some of the companies we have worked with over many years, and some of our valued colleagues have exited the industry, hopefully temporarily. And that is before the human cost of what we've gone through, whether in terms of health or the loss of livelihoods, both here and in many of our destinations, where the degree of possible government support is a mere fraction of what we've had here, however inadequate many of us might feel it has been. We are all taking the time to reflect, not least because there's been so much to do, but perhaps now we can turn an eye to the future and start on the fun part of our industry. Above all else, the last 12 months has been a long way from being fun, and as we return to normality in this country and as borders reopen, we can look forward to being reminded that we do, where we work, and that we create dreams for our customers is a privilege we have long loved. At Parter, we've tried to support our members in any way we can. We're part of the Travel Industry Alliance and the Save Future Travel campaign. And while there is understandable impatience about the progress and some of the less than helpful comments that have been made, there is preparation for the return of the travel sector happening in government. It is now that matter of when and how rather than the if. And whatever our personal frustrations, this is progress and gives cause for optimism.
Sometimes charges that are made, and I'm sure BA is coming in fresh. And so they can do this. But I hope to understand that I don't know this, but this is a change in this.
In terms of our own actions and events over the last 12 months, it has necessarily been limited to online, but hopefully the 30 virtual events we've hosted have allowed one or two smiles to be raised in the grim times we've all seen. The future is brighter and we will get there. And with that, let us begin. And I'd like to introduce our treasurer, Chris Lee, who will run the discussion.
Thanks, Chris. So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted and honoured to be joined by our panel of guests who are the following. Mr. Dale Keller, who is Chief Executive of BAR UK, which is the Board of Airline Representatives. Pete Mills, Partnerships and Distribution Manager for Tourism Australia, UK and Northern Europe. Michael Marshall joining us from Bangkok, the Chief Commercial Officer of the Minor Hotels. And our very own Sam Clark, Managing Director of Experience Travel Group. So are we ready, gents? This is the question. Lots of questions for you. We'll try and be as pleasant as possible, no fighting. Be good to each other. Let's start. Let's start with, it makes sense to really start following the announcement of the roadmap on the 22nd of February by our very own Boris Johnson. And that leads to sort of where are we at the moment? So the first question really is all about what's happened since then in terms of booking and inquiry trends. So I'm going to start with Sam. Perhaps you can give us a little quick summary of what's happened since that date.
Well, this is the point that if I was TUI, I'd say that we've seen a massive surge in bookings ever since, but obviously we haven't, and I think that's probably reflected around the industry. However, I think there are some positives to have taken out of it. We have seen a big pickup of interest on our site. We've seen considerable more activity there, so SEO activities going on. People are searching for holidays, so they're starting to think about it. I think we're all pretty aware that there's not going to be a big switch on date, anymore. That idea went out, last year, but slowly we're seeing a bit of a return of consumer confidence. And I think the date that was given, the 17th of May, however provisional, has helped build that consumer confidence, and we are seeing that reflected in, as I say, activity on the website and even what people are saying on the phones. But that surge of bookings, not yet.
And in terms of what bookings that have come in, Sam, has the travel period changed at all?
I mean, the bookings that are coming in are for 2022, so they're well in advance. We're seeing bookings for summer 2022. We're seeing bookings for, a bit of certainty. People think, yeah, that's far enough ahead that will happen, especially with the vaccines, etc. I can do that. And even offering, very flexible terms and all the rest of it, people are unwilling to commit to destinations which aren't yet open, which is obviously the majority of Asia Pacific for this summer. So we're not yet seeing bookings for this summer.
Okay, and Michael, would you say that obviously your hotel group goes across more than just Asia Pacific? Would you say that there are certain destinations, obviously Maldives is one that always seems to jump out, which were open or are still open, even though we can't go out at the moment, where the bookings are still coming in a lot more? But generally, obviously in the Asia Pacific region, we've been closed. So do you think that's making a bit of a difference in terms of what's coming back so far?
I think definitely there's things we can learn, about reopening for the Asia Pacific region from what we've seen in the Maldives. We've got 6 resorts in the Maldives, and we opened up in October, and we were surprised that the pent-up demand was so strong that we really had a lot of very short-term booking windows, which actually produced for October 60 to 65% occupancies in the properties. So I think once it's clear, how you can travel, how you get into the country, what kind of COVID tests, etc. you need. Now the UK has dropped off, since the lockdown in the Maldives, but there is bookings for the summer coming in, which is good. If I go back to Asia Pacific, picking up on Sam's point, we've got a lot of inquiries and a lot of interest, but not really bookings. And I don't expect to see those until things are clearer. But definitely our partners are saying 2022 is definitely when we see that will happen.
Right. So searches and inquiries are happening and scaling up but the conversion yet isn't ready. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do we think that question possibly to Pete? Do you think possibly that the announcement by destination of when we are opening will lead to that move from inquiry to booking?
Yeah, hopefully, Chris. I mean, yeah, we saw it last year when, you know, like places in Spain were opening up and things like that, and there was a surge straight away. So we are anticipating, and it's worth going back to what we've been doing the last 12 months, is keeping the dream alive. So when the announcements of border openings do open up, the consumer's not going to be lost for where to go. So we've been keeping that story alive, keeping the dream alive. So when borders announce, you know, when the announcements do come that borders are going, there should be this pent-up demand, which we anticipate is there and ready to go. It's worth noting that behind the scenes, you know, we keep a really close eye on this. And, you know, there's been a lot of reports on this as well, but we want to point those people that have, you know, that pent-up demand, we want to point them in the right direction, because when the borders do start opening up, there's going to be a lot of noise out there. So for someone like Australia, hopefully the always on dreaming content that we are providing with them now will put us in good stead at the right time.
Excellent. Okay. And Dale, our friends at Travel Weekly asked, what destinations or types of destinations do you think will appeal to the UK after COVID, and why?
I think safe and exciting is going to be very appealing. I think if you look at how the recovery is likely to come, we can see there's a pent-up demand for visiting friends and relatives, and also for leisure, particularly after the reopening is summer sun destinations. So that's likely to drive the recovery. I think the business travel sector and probably the city break sector faces a lot more challenges going forward. We're probably going to see people, apart from the VFR, people that want to go on holiday, they might go, rather than doing a summer holiday and a couple of city breaks or a winter break, we might see a contraction down to a single destination where they spend more, stay a bit longer. And a lot of that will be driven by the fact we're going to have costs and process, because if you're not being vaccinated and you're required to take tests, or there's any element of quarantine left or whatever, all of that acts as a cost and a deterrent. So why wouldn't you go for that one journey instead of 3 and spend a bit more? But, you know, I think it'll be a moving feast, and there's no one size fits all. People will travel for all sorts of different reasons. So make it appealing to go where you guys want them to go.
Great stuff. Okay. So along those lines, when we're looking at for the inquiries and the bookings that we are getting at the moment, particularly the inquiries and the searches, this goes back to sort of Sam and Michael, I suppose. Are we seeing any change in those customer demands, the types of holiday, or the lengths of holiday, or the amount that's being spent or being promised to be spent on those holidays? Are they changing at all? Sam?
Well, we've got some interesting data from a survey that we did with ATO recently, in that there seems to be people planning to spend a lot more on their holidays. So the almost across the board, people are intending to spend more. So clearly there is some pent up money out there. And they're talking about experiences a lot. So yeah, the safety thing does come in, but there's really lots of experience. People are talking about walking, people are talking about wellness, people are talking about what they missed about travel. So I think there is a definite move, or intention, at least at this stage, towards, you know, travel that really counts, travel that really makes a difference, and you know, that they really enjoy.
So potentially sort of a deeper experience, which people are prepared to pay more money for, unlocking all these savings they've been saving away in this last year or so. Michael, would you agree with that?
Yes, definitely. I mean, from what we've seen so far, people are spending more in the resorts, so they're buying villa products, or upgrading themselves into bigger residences and things like this. So pool villas have been very, very popular from what we've seen. Experiences is another thing, and I think that is with people spending longer in a resort or in a location. You know, having those experiences available that are different. You know, that have a kind of connection, if you like, with the local community. We're seeing people much more interested in sustainability, and picking up on Sam's last point, wellness. We've actually opened 3 new wellness centres in Thailand this year during the COVID period in preparation for that.
Excellent. Okay. So we can see that the demand is possibly changing in terms of people are going to have a bit more to spend. They may want a deeper experience, and they're sort of preparing more. So when we talk about how we're preparing for that reopening, so obviously we're waiting by destination for announcements as to when we're going to open. What preparations do we need to do in order to get there? So Dale, from an airline perspective, obviously this is quite important. What sort of notice period do you need to get things all up and running again? Because apparently you can't just sort of fly the planes tomorrow, can you? So
it's really variable. Right now we're running at less than 10% of the normal capacity, and that's mainly moving some essential workers or UK nationals still deciding to come back home, or foreign nationals in the UK who decide to go back to their homes overseas, is pretty much what we're seeing. But some of that capacity can be ramped up again. It might be carrying a lot of cargo and running at very low seat factors. So there's a big difference between ramping up capacity where you're already operating, as opposed to those routes where the capacity is being completely removed and there is no flight connection at the moment and it's got to be restarted from scratch. A short haul narrow body multi-day operation is much easier to get up and running quickly than a long haul route. So you can see that it's quite variable there, but I think the industry needs as much time as possible. But with the pent up demand, I think we're going to just have to take a punt, put the capacity on, and play a bit of cat and mouse, chicken and egg to see what comes first, the capacity or the demand. And there'll be some trialing out of routes, and some of that capacity might be put on and then proves not to be enough. And there might be some routes where the capacity goes on and it might have to be trimmed back because the demand doesn't eventuate, and that will be based on the other end of the route. It takes 2 hands to clap, and unless the experience is linked at both ends, then the passengers might decide not to travel anyway.
Yeah, so I suppose this is quite a good point, is that in some ways the presumption is, once we're allowed to travel again, this will be this big pent up demand to go travel. But of course the supply needs to be there. We need to have the capacity to be taking all these people, and the presumption that we're going to go up to 100% capacity again, or anything like the capacity of 2019 that quickly, I suppose, is going to be one of the things which will possibly hold back, and may have pricing implications as well. I mean, Dale?
Well, Chris, I think the airline industry is raring to go. We want to get those aircraft back in the air. I mean, did you see the IATA stats this week from some polling they did, that 57% of those polled expect to be traveling within 2 months of the pandemic being contained? But 84% they said they wouldn't travel if there's any chance of quarantine at the other end of the route. So you can really see what those figures are telling you. In terms of pricing elasticity against demand, all of the airline reservation systems and yield management systems have had a real challenge. They weren't really designed for this kind of a massive impact on demand. But one thing I think to think about from all of your point of view is that airlines can adjust capacity much easier than the hotel market. So you might see a much bigger variance in the hotel price than what you see in the airline ticket price, because the fixed costs and operating costs are quite different between the two parts of the sector. I think it could even impact like the Airbnb market, because if you've got a destination where there's a lot of hotel capacity, far exceeds the air capacity, but the demand's high, you might see hotels offering amazing experiences and upgrades and all sorts of stuff, which would then put the Airbnb market into difficulty, because why would you take an Airbnb when you can get such a stonking deal in a hotel or a resort? So you can see that it's a really complex mix of influences that are going to determine how the industry shapes up.
Sure. I'd quite like to sort of divert into this conversation about pricing, I think, because I think it's quite an interesting format for me. I was on a previous webinar when it was talked about, you know, are we going to do what the Brits often do and go for very price-led recovery? But with the surge in, or what we believe will be this real pent-up demand, do we have to drive a recovery based on cheapest price? Sam?
I think that'd be a terrible move. I mean, from what everyone's saying, they're looking for experiences, they're looking to get out. I think that we need to go for quality. We can't dive straight back into volume and numbers again. You know, the whole sustainability, carbon, etc. It's not gone away. That's a factor. I think it's playing more. Again, our survey showing that that's playing more with customers as well. People are thinking about how much they should travel. So no, I think we should think about the experience. And I think we need to remember that in terms of in destination, there's a bit of a rush to, you know, quite rightly, obviously, to think about COVID secure travel and all that sort of thing. But destinations have got to also focus on, you know, the customer experience. We showed that people were worried about going on holiday. One of the reasons that puts them off traveling, obviously, the chance of being quarantined is huge. But in terms of what puts them off in country, it's things like restrictions on moving around. It's feeling not welcome in country, and destinations need to consider this, I think, when they work out how and when they open.
Great. This was inspired by a question from Mr. Graham McKenzie. Welcome, Graham. Where he said, will destinations be strong in their desire to remain or improve sustainability as opposed to a money grab for lost revenue over the past 12, 18 months? And Pete, I'm sure you'd agree that's very much where we don't want to go back to the idea that it has got to be just about price, and that experience is what it's all about. We want to sell.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's worth noting that in all of this, you know, Australia was going down the route really well of sustainable practices anyway. And over this whole period, it's worth noting that Tourism Australia has actually employed a head of sustainability for the organisation. So it's really high up for us for sure. And we're definitely encouraging conscious travel. One of the phrases that comes out from Penny Rafferty, who heads up our sustainability stream, is about traveling better. So, I mean, that doesn't automatically speak to traveling cheaply. But going back to what we were saying just now, you know, people are sat on money. They've got savings that they want to spend, and we know that they want to stay longer, spend better, and they're prepared to spend on slightly better experiences as well. And whether that's private touring or small group touring in a more conscious way, then you know, we're anticipating that for sure.
Great stuff. And Michael, presumably as well, you don't want to see business coming back just cheap, do you?
No, and I think we definitely have an opportunity here, you know, in the new normal to actually build on this experience opportunity and get people to enjoy the local experiences and take part in sustainable activities with the villages or wherever we're located. And we've seen, even with the domestic travel that we've had in Thailand, that you know, Thais didn't really go to the north that much, particularly you know, Chiang Rai, Golden Triangle, where we've actually built on our elephant camp there a jungle bubble experience, so you can sleep with the elephants, you can watch the stars at night, and it's fully booked all the time. So we don't have to discount it. And going back to the Maldives, you know, we haven't had to go down the discount route. You know, the people are looking actually for, you know, spending more and work, you know, what can I do? You know, whether that's diving, swimming with rays, you know, all these sort of things that you can do in the Maldives, people are buying. So I don't think we need to go down the discounting route when we reopen.
Good. I think this is a great thing to hear, because I think as an industry, we had definitely over the years gone more and more, margins get tighter and tighter and tighter, not leaving the chance. So this has given us perhaps one of those opportunities to reset. So perhaps one of the possible positive aspects of going forward. So in terms of one of the other practical, sorry, Michael. You
know, I was just going to say the other thing that I think is important is we need to make it as easy as possible for people to travel. You know, now we were just talking about the flights and everything, but at the moment, you know, there's so much paperwork involved take, for example, if you have to come to Thailand, you know very well, Chris, because both of us have done it. You know, if you need to have your fit to fly certificate, you need a COVID certificate, you need maybe a vaccine certificate in the future, you need COVID insurance, and then you need some kind of visa. If we can limit the amount of visas or certificate of entries and everything, so that it is easy for people to travel when they want to travel, as simply as they can, whilst of course, you know, maintaining the safety and standards that we need.
Well, that brings us on very nicely. Thank you, Michael. That's a perfect introduction on that one, because we have a question again from Graham, which says, do all the speakers support vaccine passports? If we can wrap that up into a slightly bigger subject. So we've obviously, as you said, you've got vaccine passports, we've got having to take COVID tests still as well, could be visas as well. So I know that Dale, from, I think I saw from Singapore Airlines, they were trialing the first IATA digital passport. Is that right?
Yep.
I think so. I think that's going ahead in mid-March, mid this month.
It's this week. The first thing I'd like to get us all aligned on is we don't call it a health passport or a vaccination passport. It is a digital health wallet. And there is a big difference, because a passport indicates that it's a requirement to travel. The health certificate or digital health app is really demonstrating what your how you meet the entry requirement, because the entry requirement may be different depending on what country it is and what level of health certification you're holding. But we're absolutely adamant as an airline industry is we don't want a situation where if you're not vaccinated, you can't travel. So that's why we're very much asking through the Global Travel Task Force for a health certification system that identifies people who are either vaccinated or through the testing regime. And the two have to sort of sit together, and ultimately, you know, one will supersede the other, or we'll get to the point in the where the pandemic is over and this COVID becomes just a background condition like flu or anything else, that you don't require potentially any of those things. But getting the technology in place, which is what the IATA Travel Pass and many other apps in the market are doing, is taking a digital output from the government or the certificate laboratory and putting it into the consumer's own digital smart device. The data stored on that device, it's not shared with the airline. The airline just simply gets a good to go. This passenger meets the entry requirement of this country, and away they go. And that's essentially what where we need to get. If we don't have a digital solution, which we might not from the very earliest days of the reopening, it's very difficult to rescale the business back to anything like the numbers we had without, you know, queues of people. We're very keen to avoid that. And a lot of the confidence of people traveling the summer will be based on the experience of the first movers who traveled in the first few weeks and what was their experience like. So our work with the Global Travel Task Force is we've got to get this right. We've got to get the process right, and the public and the industry have to buy into that process. We deliver it, we operationalize it, and then away we go.
Yeah, good to hear, because I think it scares some of us, the idea of all individual governments coordinating themselves to have some sort of coordination in terms of what's going to be expected for that entry. And as you say, Michael, we don't want to end up with so many pieces of paper to fill in. But I suppose the flip side of the vaccinations, Pete, if I may come to you, is about, so our vaccination program is going along pretty well, and that's great news. But obviously the countries that we want to visit, it's important to us to know how they're getting on, because if you take our friends in Australia as a good example, those countries where they've had very low cases and deaths of COVID in their country, then the vaccination program takes on a bit of a different meaning. So obviously, you could honestly say that the strength and the speed of the vaccination rollout program in the UK was partly driven by the need of the fact that we were at 60,000 cases a day and over 1,200 deaths. So, but in a country like Australia, very different positions. So, Pete, is there a big will in Australia to get your population vaccinated?
Yeah, it's a really interesting situation, Chris. Obviously, the Australian government went down the health route with COVID and pretty much eradicated it. And, you know, they've had very few cases and deaths over there. So, yeah, they are in a unique situation globally compared to a lot of other destinations. But it's worth saying that the Australian government recognises that vaccinations are the way out of this. And they started the rollout last month. And that's continuing now, and they anticipate that the majority of the population will be vaccinated by October. So weirdly, that actually coincides with roughly what the UK is saying. So who knows what's going to happen, but the government recognises it's the way out of this situation. So they will be pushing that for the population to take.
That's really good to hear. That's really good to hear. And Sam, our friends at Travel Weekly again asked us, what would the panel say to the UK government's task force, which is due to report on the 12th of April, I believe, when making the case for a resumption of travel to the region?
Yeah, what wouldn't we say? It's we need planning time. We need we need notice. You know, we can't say what's going to happen or what should happen. That's not really our position, but we just need time to operate. We need time to make plans, and the market needs some kind of certainty. So they need to know they're not going to be quarantined all of a sudden out in destination, and that's the biggest fear that we're hearing from the market. And they need to be. We need to not hear that people shouldn't be booking holidays for the summer and for time in the period. I mean, I cannot get my head around this, that the travel industry's bent over backwards to do flexible booking conditions, to enable people to start booking, to enable people to start having something to look forward to do what we do, and yet we're being consistently told that it's not legal or not the right thing to do.
Yes, slight mixed messaging, I think, and inaccurate messaging. And being told things are illegal when they're not hasn't necessarily helped. But going to try and back to being positive. So I suppose one of the summaries could be that, you know, let's be honest, the UK roadmap was a good exercise. Yeah. It definitely set out a clear series of dates as well as data, which we can work to on the understanding that these might evolve as the cases come under more control or not. And I suppose, therefore, what we're looking for from an international travel point of view is our own roadmap from the 12th of April onwards, which takes us from there to flying. So if we have the roadmap concept seems to be a good one. So can we have our own roadmap, I suppose, is what we're looking for. Is that right, Sam?
Yeah, and even that's right. And even if it's conservative, that's more manageable than you know, than sort of changing it and promising something and sending out mixed messages. But a clear roadmap is absolutely critical.
And conservative with a small c.
Conservative with a small c, yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, good stuff. So Graham has asked, so do you think that only very limited travel corridors will open post 17th of May? So, and that this will be based on very strict data and the judgment of Grant Hapless. Thank you, Graham. Naughty. Okay, so again, probably difficult for us to sort of predict what will and will not happen in terms of dates, but we'll put the question ish to Dale. Do you think there's any inklings from you?
Yeah, I mean, I can't give the government discussions from the task force, but I mean, if you look at the government's phased approach, I think that kind of gives you an indication that it's not going to be like 17 May or shortly thereafter, that it's just sort of a free-for-all, or that we're going to see perhaps travel corridors like we did last summer. You've got to remember that the travel corridors last summer were a unilateral policy by the UK government based on risk overseas and infection coming into the UK. I think they're really keen that that would be replaced by a bilateral agreement between countries. And there's a huge amount of sense around that. And we totally support that concept, because it means you can match up the passenger journey in both directions, which makes it far more attractive for people to travel and bring confidence back into the market. We've also seen no indication that we're probably going to move away in any hurry from a red, amber and green country classification. So I think for a lot of you in the market and in the PARTA region and selling these destinations or representing these destinations, you need to be, you know, in deep discussion at your end of the route as to where do you think your country is going to be sitting in a green, amber or red, and why, and what's taking place at your end in terms of bilateral discussions with your government, with the UK government, where you can match up. You know, so it's very much a two-way negotiation to get international travel moving again. Some countries will get there quicker than others, so therefore that would seem to indicate that there'll be countries you can travel to sooner than others, or certainly some of them will have quite, if you're a red country, I have no doubt that we'll see still severe travel restrictions on countries that are in the red, otherwise you wouldn't bother having red. And if that's the case, that any business to that country will be essential travel only, or for people who are prepared to go through a quarantine regime for some time. So I think the public are making a bit of a punt at the moment on where they think they can travel or not, probably using some vouchers they've been sitting on, making a booking on the basis that it's flexible. But you know, anyone who says they know which country will be on or not at this point is making it up. And I think that's why there's a bit of reticence from ministers to kind of encourage people to book and feel that they're let down. But I do agree there's a bit of narrative there, a bit more positivity would not go amiss. Thank you.
Yeah, so I suppose what we've got is two issues. It's not just only when will individual destinations be open, but giving us notice as to when. So I think, you know, for instance, we're not expecting, if you take a destination like Australia, for instance, we're not suggesting that they should come and tell us, right, we're open in a month's time. We understand it will take a lot longer, but if we could have a lot of notice, as soon as we can get notice of when that opening date is, that will give us the encouragement and give our customers the encouragement to then commit to booking, which is what the delay is at the moment, isn't it? It's that lag between the two. And so we did have a question from Travel Weekly, which said, when do you think is a realistic date for a return of international to the APAC region from the UK? And I'll probably just take that as a very simply, there isn't one date. It would be very much different according to different destinations. But as I said, I think it's more about not just when we will return, but having the notice so we can sort of give customers a roadmap to sort of re-entry, if you like. So I'd like to now probably come along to the last sort of question, really to look at the positives. So look at what do we think, and we've touched on a couple of them already, but from each of you, what do you think are the opportunities that the post-COVID world offers us as an industry, or as a hotel group, or as a tour operator, or as a destination? So what are the positive things that we can look after? The things that actually, if COVID hadn't happened, we wouldn't actually have benefited from. And I'll start with Pete.
Oh, do you know what, Chris? There's actually a ton of stuff, but one thing I was thinking about that has really stood out to us at Tours in Australia is the engagement from the trade. You know, if you go back 12 months, we had no idea when people were going on furlough what sort of engagement we were going to have for frontline sellers, but we were absolutely staggered. And we've got a really interesting stat because, you know, globally this is happening. So we normally engage with our Aussie Specialist Program, our frontline platform to train frontline sellers. In a normal year, we train about 32,000 agents. In the last 12 months, that's jumped to 80,000. So, you know, that engagement there and that desire from the agents to learn about our destination is absolutely staggering. So we love that. But in terms of other stuff, it's given us the time to focus on things like sustainability, traveling better. We've already touched on this as well. And then take a step back and think about what will be our point of difference going forward. So we really want to focus on things like the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture, which is, you know, unique to Australia. It's nowhere else. It's our point of difference. We're going to focus on that going forward. So yeah, it's taken us, you know, we've taken a step back, look at what we do best, and then we're going to really sort of sell those and use those as our selling points going forward.
That is great news. I mean, I think trade engagement it's taught us all a lot, hasn't it? It's given us a lot of faith in that trade, and also taught us that actually going forward, we won't just be going back to the in-person events. We'll have those again, but this sort of hybrid of communication, because we've had a lot more quantity communication digitally than we would have been able to have in person, and that's something which we can take going forward. So I think that's really good, and love to hear about Aboriginal tourism and that impact, certainly particularly for the Northern Territory. So well done, thank you indeed. Dale.
Well, I think from a PARTA region, you're selling the dream of these incredible destinations, and you know the UK public absolutely love your region and what you have on offer. So I think after over a year in lockdown, that will never be more appealing. The next one I'd say is in the airline industry. I think there's opportunity to open up point-to-point destination city pairs with long-range narrow-body or twin-engine aircraft in a way that we haven't seen before. A lot of the world's four-engine fleet have been retired, apart from some of the Middle East majors who will still continue with a very successful operation, including the Airbus A380, I am sure. But I think elsewhere, I think these twin-engine long-range aircraft will open up all sorts of new opportunities potentially, and I think you should keep an eye on that in your region particularly. And then finally, from an airline point of view, I think there's a real opportunity for premium cabin leisure travel on a scale we haven't seen before, particularly if the business traffic comes back later. And I think that ties into the what you're trying to sell on long haul to PARTA region with quality product, not slashing and discounting, offer a real experience, and the airline industry can be part of that by providing a lot more capacity of premium product to the high spending leisure sector.
Fantastic answer. Good. Michael.
I think what we'll see is really people want personalised. Now they've been looking forward to this trip for a year or more. We're already getting it in the type of inquiries we're getting. So, being able to add those experiences that we've been talking about earlier, but people want to, take a river trip, spend time in that destination. We've got Mekong Kingdoms on the Mekong, which is our, new cruising boats that we have. There's a lot of interest for that. I think wellness is definitely a big trend, especially more medical wellness, which is something that we're looking at, not just a traditional spa and relaxation that we, were famous for with Anantara Spas. So we've just opened Raksa in Bangkok, which is famous. So I think personalization, wellness, and it's given us the opportunity, I think, this whole COVID to really ramp up on our whole digital use of tools, and we're doing that in our communications, but also at hotel level. The number of people now using our apps to order room service or to get their room cleaned or even to make bookings has gone up a lot. And we've seen that in the Maldives and in Dubai, where, we've seen UK travelers coming in. So those are the areas I see. Thank you.
Great. And the future is bright for tour operators such as yourself, Sam?
Yeah, I think so. I think for all of us, it's been a chance to reset, hasn't it? And to focus on the value that we add to our customers and work out how we can double down on that, as we came temporarily and against our will out of the hamster wheel. I think for us specifically, there's three things. It's firstly the trade. We've seen the sort of flip side of what Pete was saying, but we've seen some incredible interest from the trade. So we've seen that people are, I think 70% of our bookings in February were trade. Usually it'd be about 20%. So people are trusting the trade more. I think they're in an uncertain situation. They're going to people they know. They're going to that travel agent that they know down, who can help guide them through. And again, in our survey, in the ATO survey, we saw a big move towards booking with specialists and travel agents. So I think there's a big opportunity there. We've really been able to show our value. I think the idea about kind of bucket list, but also longer, more experience-based trips, really when you do travel long haul, really making it count. I think that's going to be really interesting opportunity. Doing things, again, that's something that the trade can bring that people can't necessarily do themselves or can't do themselves as easily. and don't have the reassurance. And then sort of thirdly, there's interesting opportunities opening up in things like wellness. So for us, wellness seems to be, you know, people thinking about what they want to get out of travel, and we're launching a new product called Revitalize, which is actually about slowing people down once they're in destination, rather than moving around constantly, really making the most of each destination, each place that you're staying in, finding out about it, but also taking time for yourself to revitalize quite literally after what's been a trying year for all of us.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, all of you. So our roadmap that was announced by Boris Johnson has led to a pathway that we've now led out. This pathway seems to start off with the current customer searching a lot more, inquiries a lot more. Bookings aren't quite there yet. We're waiting to have perhaps a bit more hardline deadlines of when destinations are going to open, and also looking for the roadmap that was from Boris turning into a roadmap for international travel, hopefully as a result of the announcement on the 12th of April. That we'll need to see a coordination of all those travel entry requirements, so that we don't spend all our time filling in one too many forms, but it's coordinated on an international basis and will require bipartisan relationships as well as across different borders. But we finished with a huge list, it seems to me, of positive reasons why we're going to look forward to our destination and an industry which we can actually do better. We can provide better customer satisfaction. We can have a closer relationship with our trade. And believe it or not, I think we can even make more money in doing so. So sustainable and an industry which has got a very bright future. So thanks very much for all your input. I'll hand back to Jo.
Thank you, Chris. So yeah, a huge thank you to all of our panelists, Dale, Pete, Michael, Sam, and to our chairman as well for opening the afternoon's meeting, and of course to Mr. Lee for moderating that and keeping a very interesting conversation going. Thank you to everybody who asked questions as well, and again to our media friends who joined us. So yeah, so it just leaves us to wish those of you who are attending Exchange next week to have a very successful show. And as Chris Crampton said, hopefully next time we see you, it'll be in person, followed by a visit to the pub. So yeah, huge thank you to everyone. If you have any questions afterwards, feel free to email myself or Abby, and we'll follow up with a recording and some keynotes as well for you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone.